Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your paycheck buys less, your groceries cost more, and your savings account, despite all your hard work, is quietly losing value month after month. Most people feel this happening, but very few truly understand why. Inflation isn't just an economic headline, it's the silent force shaping your daily life, your long-term goals, and the future of your money.
It really is. And once you finally understand how it works, you'll start seeing your financial decisions in a completely different way.
Welcome back to Invest Education Hub, your trusted source for learning how to invest smarter and build long-term wealth. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the source material to demystify this critical economic concept. Our mission is to go beyond the definition and get to the strategy. So at its core, inflation is when, over time, the average price of goods and services rises.
And that means the value, the purchasing power of your money drops.
Right.
It's that gap between what the number says and what it can actually buy. Let's say last year you needed $1,000 to cover your essential monthly bills.
Okay, a nice round number.
And this year, that exact same set of bills, it now costs you $1,100. That extra $100 is inflation in your daily life. It's a real reduction in your standard of living, even if your bank account balance looks the same.
And that's a key point. We're not talking about just one thing getting more expensive, like when gas prices spike for a month.
No, that's just volatility. Inflation is a sustained, broad-based rise across, well, pretty much everything. Rent, food, cars, healthcare, the whole economy.
That idea of a sustained increase in the general price level, that's the official definition economists use, isn't it?
It is, and they're very specific about those words. Sustained means it's a trend, not a blip. And general price level means it's happening everywhere, reallocating wealth across the entire system.
Let's make that reallocation, or really that erosion, very real. We found a great scenario in the source material. Imagine you earn $3,000 a month.
Yep.
In year one, your expenses, rent, food, all that, come to $2,400. That leaves you with $600 left over. A decent cushion.
You're doing okay.
Now, year two rolls around. Inflation's been running hot, maybe 5 or 6%. Your salary hasn't caught up yet, but your rent just went up 5%. Groceries are up 10%.
The things you have to buy.
Exactly. Suddenly, those same items cost you $2,600. Your leftover cash plummets from $600 down to $400. You're literally $200 poorer in spending power.
And you didn't do anything wrong. You worked just as hard, earned the exact same number of dollars, but you're still losing ground. That's the quiet theft of inflation.
And what's wild is that governments actually aim for a little bit of this. The target is usually around 2%.
Right.
Why? Why would anyone want their money to lose value?
It's a great question, and it seems totally counterintuitive. But that 2% target is seen as the sweet spot for a healthy economy.
Healthy how?
Well, for one, it gently discourages people from hoarding cash under the mattress. It encourages spending and investing, which, fuels economic growth. But more importantly, it provides a buffer against the opposite problem, deflation, which is far, far more dangerous. If inflation is at zero, the next recession could easily push prices into negative territory. And that can trigger an economic death spiral.
We'll definitely circle back to that. But first, if 2% is the target, how do they even know if they're hitting it? How do you measure the price of everything?
That's the job of the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI. It's the government's main yardstick.
The famous shopping basket.
Exactly. It's this meticulously tracked, imaginary basket that's supposed to reflect what a typical urban household buys.
It's a huge basket. It's not just, milk and bread. It's housing, electricity, a doctor's visit, college tuition, a new car.
Everything. Housing and transportation are the biggest chunks, but it's all in there. So if that whole basket cost $100 last year and, say, $104 today, then CPI inflation is 4%.
Simple enough. But in the news, you often hear them mention two numbers. There's the main CPI and then something called core CPI.
Yes, and core CPI is what policymakers, especially the central bank, really watch closely.
So what do they strip out for the core number?
They remove food and energy prices
But people need to eat and drive. Why take those out?
because they can be incredibly volatile. Think about it. A war on the other side of the world can make oil prices go crazy, or a bad harvest can make wheat prices spike.
So those things don't necessarily reflect the underlying health of the economy?
Precisely. Those are supply shocks. Core CPI tries to give a clearer signal of the more persistent underlying inflation trend by looking at everything else.
Okay, so That's what it is and how we measure it.
Yeah.
Let's get to the big question. Where does it come from? The sources lay out three main drivers, right?
Yes, three big forces, and they often overlap. The first one is the classic, the one everyone sort of intuitively understands: demand pull inflation.
The old too much money chasing too few goods.
That's the one. This happens when the economy is running hot. Unemployment is low, people feel confident, maybe there's been some government stimulus.
So everyone wants to buy stuff at the same time.
Exactly. Everyone decides to renovate their kitchen and book a vacation. But the factories can't make enough stoves, and the airlines don't have enough seats. Demand outstrips supply. And what do businesses do when everyone wants what they're selling?
They raise prices.
They raise prices. It's a classic sign of an overheated economy.
Now, contrast that with the second force, which feels very different. Cost push inflation.
Right. This isn't about strong demand. This is about the cost of making things going up.
The inputs.
The inputs, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe the price of steel doubles, or a shipping crisis makes containers 10 times more expensive, or workers negotiate a big wage increase. The business has to pass those higher costs on to you, the consumer, to protect their profit margin.
This sounds a lot like the supply shocks we just mentioned. The pandemic's supply chain mess is a perfect example of this.
A textbook example. It wasn't that people suddenly wanted more things, it was that it became much more expensive to produce and deliver them.
Okay, so we have demand pulling prices up and costs pushing them up. What's the third force?
The third one is maybe the trickiest, because it's all in our heads. It's called built-in, or expectation, inflation.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's entirely a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
It works like this. If you and everyone you know expects prices to rise by, say, 5% next year,
Then you're going to go to your boss and demand at least a 5% raise just to keep up.
of course you are. And the business, which is also expecting its cost to go up and knows it will have to pay higher wages, does what? It raises its prices proactively.
Which then proves the workers right, making them demand an even bigger raise the next year. It just spirals.
It's a psychological loop. And this is why you hear central bankers talking so much about anchoring inflation expectations. They're trying to break that mental cycle and convince everyone that they'll keep inflation low so we don't build it into our behavior.
And when those expectations get unanchored, that's when you can move into the more dangerous speeds of inflation. We know 1 to 3% is considered healthy.
The sweet spot.
But when you get into high inflation, 5, 10% or more, that's when it really starts to hurt people.
It becomes incredibly painful. Wages just can't keep up. And this is where it gets really unfair. The people who suffer the most are those on fixed incomes, retirees with a set pension, for example. Their income is flat, but their costs are exploding. Their financial world shrinks every single month.
And then you have the extremes. We've all seen the pictures from history. Hyperinflation.
Yeah, that's a complete economic catastrophe. We're talking about prices rising 50% per month. Think about that. Something that costs $1 today costs $1.50 in 30 days.
Money becomes meaningless.
It becomes worthless. You see it in places like Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. People just abandon the currency and go back to bartering or using a more stable foreign currency like the US dollar.
Now, we mentioned the opposite, deflation being even more feared. Why is that? I mean, things getting cheaper sounds pretty good on the surface.
It sounds great, but it's an economic poison. Think about it. If you know for a fact that the new phone or car you want will be cheaper in 6 months,
You wait.
everyone waits. And when everyone stops spending, businesses see their sales collapse. They cut production, they lay off workers, and the whole economy grinds to a halt.
And what about debt?
That's the other killer. Deflation makes debt heavier. If you have a $100,000 mortgage, that number is fixed. But the dollars you're using to pay it back are becoming more valuable over time. In real terms, your debt is actually growing, can lead to mass defaults and bankruptcies.
So central banks will do almost anything to avoid that deflationary spiral.
Absolutely anything.
This brings us to the part that really hits home for everyone listening. Who wins and who loses in all of this? The personal finance scorecard. And the undisputed #1 loser in a high inflation environment is the cash saver.
Without a doubt.
If you have, say, $10,000 sitting in a savings account earning 0.5% while inflation is running at 5%,
You are losing 4.5% of your purchasing power every single year. You didn't lose any dollars from your account, but you lost the strength of those dollars.
And that compounds. That $10,000 after just 10 years of 5% inflation would only buy, what about $6,000 buys today? It's a massive silent tax on your savings.
It really is. And right there with cash savers are, as we said, anyone on a fixed income that doesn't have a cost of living adjustment, their financial security just erodes away.
So who are the winners, or at least the beneficiaries?
Well, the biggest group is often borrowers with long-term fixed-rate debt.
Like a mortgage.
A mortgage is the perfect example.
Right.
Let's say you got a 30-year mortgage at a 3% interest rate a few years ago. If inflation is now running at 5 or 6%, your salary is likely to rise with general prices over time, but your mortgage payment,
It stays exactly the same.
it is fixed. You are paying back that massive loan with dollars that are becoming progressively weaker and cheaper.
Yeah.
The real value of your debt is shrinking.
The other big winner category would be the owners of real assets, right?
Yes, assets that have intrinsic value, things like real estate, stocks and profitable companies, commodities like gold or oil. Over the long run, their prices tend to rise with, and often faster than, inflation. They act as a hedge. Their nominal value climbs as the value of cash falls.
Okay, so if inflation is this massive economic force, who's actually at the controls? Who's supposed to fix it when it gets too high?
In the United States, that job falls to the Federal Reserve, the Fed.
And their main weapon is interest rates.
It's their primary tool. They have what's called a dual mandate: keep employment high and keep prices stable, which means keeping inflation near that 2% target.
So when inflation is running too high, like it has been recently, the Fed raises interest rates. But how does that actually work? How does the Fed's rate hike end up affecting the price of my groceries?
It's a transmission mechanism. The Fed raises its main benchmark rate, which is the rate at which banks lend to each other overnight.
So it immediately gets more expensive for banks to get money.
Right. And since their costs just went up, they pass that on. They raise the rates they charge you on everything: mortgages, car loans, credit cards, business loans. Everything gets more expensive.
And when it costs more to borrow money?
You borrow less
Ah.
and you spend less. People put off buying that new house. Businesses cancel that expansion project. It deliberately cools down demand across the entire economy.
Hitting that demand pull factor we talked about.
Exactly. It's designed to slow things down until supply can catch up and prices stabilize. And of course, if the economy's weak and they're worried about deflation, they do the exact opposite. They cut rates to make borrowing cheap and encourage spending.
It really is a constant balancing act.
A very delicate one. And understanding that brings us to the most important actionable takeaway for you listening. You have to defend your money. You have to invest.
When you hear the phrase, you need to beat inflation, this is what it's about. It means your investment return has to be higher than the rate of inflation. You need a positive real return.
Right. If inflation is 4% and your savings account is paying you 1%, your real return is negative 3%. Your wealth is actively shrinking.
Compare that to something like a broad stock market index fund. Historically, over the long term, they've returned something like 8 to 10% on average.
So even with 4% inflation, you're still getting 4 to 6% of real growth. You're actually building wealth, not just treading water.
And this is why our source material was so clear. Investing isn't optional for long-term goals. It's not just about getting rich. It's a fundamental defense mechanism against the erosion of your money.
It is. It's how you make sure the money you save today can actually buy what you need it to in the future. As the summary so powerfully put it, inflation is the quiet tax on your cash. You don't see a bill, but every year your money silently buys a little less.
That's a perfect place to wrap this up. We've defined inflation as rising prices and falling purchasing power. We've seen how it's measured with the CPI basket and driven by demand, costs, and our own expectations.
We saw how it punishes cash savers and benefits those with fixed debt and real assets. And we understand the Fed's role in using the interest rate lever to cool things down or heat things up.
Inflation isn't something you can escape, but it is something you can prepare for. And the people who win financially aren't the ones who ignore it. They're the ones who understand it and adjust their strategy accordingly.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought. Now that you understand the psychological part of it, that expectation inflation, how does that change the way you listen to the news about prices and wages? It means the economy is driven just as much by what we all believe will happen as by what's already happened. Your mindset is an economic force.
If this deep dive helped you finally see inflation clearly, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's still wondering why their money doesn't go as far as it used to.
Here at Invest Education Hub, we help you make clear, confident financial decisions that protect your future and unlock long-term growth.